The night was quiet in Los Angeles, but Keanu Reeves had never really cared for the noise of the city anyway. He preferred the small silences, the quiet corners, the streets where no one bothered to look twice. He was sitting at the edge of a small cafe terrace, a place he often came to when he needed to think. The lights around him were soft, almost golden, and the voices of strangers blended into a hum that felt strangely calming. People who saw him would expect something else. They might expect the star, the man they saw on screens, the legend of action films, the symbol of resilience and mystery. But Keanu never lived like that. He wore simple clothes, sat alone without a guard, and moved like a shadow that wanted to disappear. Tonight, however, he was not thinking about disappearing. He was thinking about someone who had recently become part of his world in a way that felt unexpected. Ana de Armas. He had worked with her before, had seen her talent, her presence on screen, and the way she carried herself with strength, but also with something softer, something almost fragile that she tried to hide. Hollywood was loud, demanding, and often cruel. He had seen it break people quietly, not with a crash, but with slow pressure, until they no longer remembered who they were. He wondered if she was carrying that weight too. The first time they spoke outside of work, it was not planned. She had found him sitting quietly near the set after a long day of shooting. She had walked over with hesitation, like someone unsure if they were intruding, and asked in a quiet voice, "You don't ever get tired of all this?" Keanu had looked up, surprised, because most people never asked questions like that. Most people only wanted to talk about success, movies, or the public image. But Anna's eyes held something different, something searching. "Sometimes," he had replied simply, his voice low and gentle. "But silence helps. I try to keep a little piece of it for myself." Those words had stayed with her. She didn't say anything right away, but he noticed her shoulders relax, as if the answer gave her permission to admit something she had been holding inside. From that night, a quiet connection had formed between them. Now, weeks later, as Keanu sat at the cafe, he heard her voice again in his memory. The tone, the honesty, the way she seemed to look for something real in a place where most things were carefully built illusions. Earlier that day, Anna had called him. Her voice was calm, but he could hear the tiredness behind it. "Can we talk?" she had asked, almost as if afraid he might say no. He had agreed without hesitation. When she arrived, she didn't wear the bright smile people usually expected from her. She wore something else: truth. Her hair was tied back simply, her clothes casual, but her eyes told him everything. There was weight, and there was worry. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice quiet, almost breaking. Keanu nodded. "Of course. Always." For a long moment, she didn't speak. She just looked at the coffee cup in her hands, fingers wrapped around it as if holding something steady. Then she finally said, "It's not what I thought it would be." He knew immediately what she meant. Hollywood. Fame. The promises that sounded like dreams but felt like chains once you lived inside them. Anna continued, her voice trembling. "People say they care about you, but it feels like they only care about what you can give them. Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing, like they only see the character, not me." Keanu leaned forward, his eyes kind but steady. He didn't interrupt her. He never interrupted. He had learned that listening was more powerful than speaking. "Do you ever feel like that?" she asked him suddenly, looking up with a mixture of hope and fear, as though his answer might either comfort her or leave her even more lost. Keanu took a slow breath. The weight of her question settled over him, and for a moment, silence filled the space between them. But it wasn't the heavy silence of emptiness. It was the kind that prepared the heart for something important. Finally, he spoke. His voice was soft, gentle, but it carried a truth that seemed to cut through the noise around them. Yes, he said. Many times. I've felt invisible, or like I wasn't the person people thought I was. But I learned something, Anna. You don't need the world to see you. You only need to see yourself. The rest, it comes and goes. His words were simple, but they reached her deeply. She lowered her gaze again, blinking back emotions she hadn't wanted to show. It's just hard, she whispered. Sometimes I wonder if I belong here at all. You belong wherever your heart feels true, Keanu said. Hollywood is not the measure of who you are. It's only a place. People will forget the roles, but the kindness you give, the respect you show, the resilience you carry, that is what remains, even when the lights are gone. Anna looked at him, and for the first time that night, she felt something break, not in a painful way, but in a way that released the pressure she had been carrying alone. And then came a silence that wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, full of shared humanity, full of something that went beyond the flashing cameras and the endless red carpets. This was the beginning. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was two people sitting across from each other, holding on to words that meant more than anyone else would ever see. And in that moment, Anna realized that Keanu's gentle words were not just advice. They were a reminder that beyond Hollywood, beyond fame, beyond all the noise, there was still something real. And she wasn't alone. The next morning, Anna woke before the sun. The city was still half asleep, the streets quiet, and the sky painted with faint gray. She sat near her window, holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Her thoughts, however, were anything but calm. She kept hearing his words again and again. You don't need the world to see you. You only need to see yourself. At first, they sounded simple, but the more she thought, the more she realized how much she had been chasing the world's gaze. Every audition, every headline, every interview felt like a test. Was she enough? Was she what people wanted her to be? But last night had been different. For the first time in months, she felt seen without acting, without performing. Keanu's quiet honesty had pierced through the noise. Yet as comforting as that was, it also scared her, because it meant she had to face something she had avoided, her own reflection. Later that day, she had to attend a gathering. Producers, actors, journalists, all the familiar faces of Hollywood were there, polished and perfect under bright lights. The room buzzed with laughter, with deals whispered in corners, with cameras waiting to capture every smile. Anna stood among them, smiling when she needed to, nodding when expected, but inside she felt a growing distance. It was like she was watching the room from the outside, like a guest who didn't belong. And then, in the middle of all the noise, she heard someone call her name. Anna! She turned and saw Keanu entering the room. He wasn't dressed to impress, just a simple dark jacket, plain shirt, his hair falling naturally. Yet the moment he walked in, the air seemed to change. People noticed, yes, but he didn't carry himself like someone demanding attention. He carried himself like someone at peace, and when his eyes found hers across the crowd, he gave a small nod. It wasn't dramatic, but it felt grounding, like a reminder, you're not alone in this room. She made her way to him, weaving past conversations and cameras until they stood near a quiet corner. You came, she said, almost whispering. Of course, he replied simply. She hesitated, then added, Sometimes I feel like I'm just pretending here, like I'm smiling for everyone else but not for myself. Keanu looked at her, his expression calm but steady. You don't owe them your smile, he said. Your smile should belong to you first. Anna let out a soft laugh, though it wasn't from humor. It was from recognition. because deep down she knew he was right. But before she could answer, a group of journalists approached, calling Keanu's name, asking for pictures. Flashes went off, questions flew, and in seconds the quiet corner was gone. Anna stepped back, feeling the pressure of eyes on them both. She expected Keanu to turn on the charm, to give the answers everyone wanted, but instead he raised his hand gently and said, "Not right now." The journalists blinked, surprised. Keanu wasn't rude, but his voice was firm. Then he looked back at Anna, as if reminding her without words, "You come first, not them." And in that moment, Anna felt something shift. Not in the room around her, but inside herself. Later, when the crowd finally pulled away, she leaned closer and whispered, "Why do you do that? Why do you never play the game everyone else plays?" Keanu paused. His eyes softened and he said, "Because I've seen what the game does to people. It takes their soul piece by piece. And when you lose yourself, no amount of fame will bring you back." The words hit her harder than she expected. For a while they stood together in silence, as though the rest of the party didn't exist. And then Keanu asked quietly, "Do you trust me?" The question surprised her. "Yes," she said. He didn't explain where. He didn't explain why. He simply led her out of the glittering room, away from the flashes, away from the endless voices. They walked through the streets, where the night felt cleaner, calmer. There was no crowd now, no applause, no demand to perform. Just the sound of footsteps and the cool breeze of Los Angeles. "Where are we going?" she asked, curious but also oddly comforted. Keanu smiled slightly, though his smile was quiet, almost hidden. "Someplace the cameras never follow." Anna looked at him, sensing that whatever was waiting ahead was not about Hollywood at all. It was something deeper, something real. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a mix of fear and excitement. Because she didn't know what was coming next. But she knew one thing. She wanted to find out. The city lights faded as Keanu led Anna through quieter streets. They walked without rushing, their footsteps echoing softly against the pavement. Anna didn't ask too many questions. She had the strange sense that whatever he was about to show her mattered more than an explanation. After a while, they reached a small park. It wasn't glamorous, not the kind of place where celebrities were photographed. The grass was uneven, the benches old, and a single street lamp flickered at the edge of the path. But the place was quiet, untouched by the noise of Hollywood. Keanu stopped near a bench and sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. "This was one of the first places I found when I moved here years ago," he said quietly. "Nobody cared who I was. Nobody even noticed. And maybe that's why I stayed." Anna sat beside him, her eyes studying his face. There was something in his tone, soft, almost heavy, that told her he wasn't just talking about a park. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" she asked gently. Keanu leaned back, his gaze fixed on the dim sky above them. He didn't answer right away. Instead, there was a long silence, as though he was weighing whether to open the door to memories he usually kept locked. Finally, he said, "People see the movies. They see the moments that look strong, but they don't see the nights when you wonder why you're still here." His words made Anna's breath catch. She didn't expect him to be so open, so raw. He continued, his voice steady but low. "I lost people I loved. I lost family. I lost someone I thought I'd spend my life with. And there were times I felt like I was carrying grief that would never leave. Hollywood didn't care. The cameras never asked. They just wanted the next performance, the next smile. But inside, I was breaking." Anna felt her throat tighten. She wanted to reach for him, to say something, but she also knew this wasn't a moment for interruptions. So she stayed silent, letting him continue. Keanu turned his head slightly toward her. His eyes were calm, but behind them was a depth that words couldn't fully hold. I tell you this, Anna, because I see the same weight in you. You don't have to pretend you're fine all the time. It's okay to admit you're not. She lowered her gaze, her fingers curling into her lap. Those words hit too close, cutting through the wall she had carefully built around herself. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning, she whispered, like I'm giving so much of myself that soon there'll be nothing left. Keanu nodded slowly, as if he understood in a way few others could. That's why you need to protect the part of you that's real. The part no one can take. Your kindness, your truth, your resilience. Hold on to that, because that's what will save you when the rest feels too heavy. Anna finally looked at him, her eyes glistening. But what if it's not enough? He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping into something almost like a promise. It will be enough, because you are enough. Even without the lights, even without the applause, you are more than what they see. The words struck her deeply, almost painfully, because she realized how much she had doubted that very thing. A silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of something unspoken, a trust forming between them, fragile but real. After a long moment, Anna asked softly, "Why are you telling me this? You don't share things like this with everyone, do you?" Keanu gave a faint smile, but it was sad, almost weary. "No, I don't. But sometimes you meet someone who reminds you of yourself in ways you can't ignore. And when that happens, silence feels like a lie." Anna's heart ached at those words. Because she realized what he was giving her wasn't just advice. It was a piece of himself. A piece most people would never see. And she wondered, sitting there. The next morning, Anna woke with a heaviness she couldn't ignore. Sleep had been broken, her thoughts circling again and again around what Keanu had shared with her. His words weren't just advice, they were a mirror, forcing her to look at herself with honesty. You are more than what they see. She repeated the line in her mind as she prepared for the day. Today was not going to be easy. She had meetings lined up, directors, producers, interviews, the kind of day where every smile had to be perfect, every answer polished. But when she looked at herself in the mirror, something inside whispered, maybe today doesn't have to be like all the others. Hours later, the meeting room was full. She sat at the long table while men in suits talked about her career as if it was a chessboard. They discussed roles, image, branding. One of them even said, "We need to make her softer, more approachable. Audiences like her beauty, but we can't make her too strong. It doesn't sell." The words cut into her like glass. Normally, she would have stayed quiet, nodding, agreeing, letting them shape her future. But today, something inside her shifted. Keanu's voice echoed again, "Your smile should belong to you first." Anna placed her hands firmly on the table. Her heart raced, her palms damp, but her voice came out steady. "I'm not going to play someone else's idea of me anymore. I want roles that show truth, strength, and vulnerability together. If that doesn't sell, then maybe you don't understand what people really want." The room went silent. She could feel every pair of eyes on her. Part of her expected someone to laugh, to dismiss her, to remind her how small her voice really was compared to their power. But no one spoke. One of the producers finally cleared his throat. "That's bold," he muttered, almost surprised. "But maybe she's right." Anna's chest tightened, but she didn't let it show. For the first time in months, she felt the ground under her own feet. After the meeting, she stepped outside, the cool air brushing against her face. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from release. She had spoken. She had chosen herself, even if only for a moment. And waiting near the street was Keanu. He leaned casually against his motorcycle, as though he had known exactly where she would be. When she saw him, she almost laughed in disbelief. "You're here," she said, her voice still shaky from the confrontation. "Always," he replied simply. "How did it go?" She walked closer, her emotions caught between exhaustion and relief. "I stood up. I told them I won't let them decide who I am." Keanu's eyes softened, and for a moment he said nothing. Then, with a quiet pride, he nodded. "That's the beginning. It won't be easy, Anna. They'll push back. They'll try to remind you of the game. But now you've taken the first step, and no one can take that from you." Her throat tightened. She wanted to thank him, but the word felt too small. Instead, she said, "You were right. The silence would have been a lie." Keanu smiled faintly, almost hidden. "And you didn't lie." They stood there, the noise of traffic passing around them, yet it felt as if the world had slowed down. But just as she was about to breathe fully, her phone buzzed. A message. She glanced at it and froze. It wasn't from a friend. It wasn't from her team. It was from someone she hadn't heard from in months. The message was short, almost sharp. "I know what you're doing. Stop before you regret it." Anna's hand shook as she locked the screen quickly. She didn't want Keanu to see. But he noticed the shift in her face, the sudden shadow that fell over her expression. "What is it?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her chest tight. Part of her wanted to say nothing. But then she remembered his words again. "Silence feels like a lie." Slowly she met his eyes. "Someone from my past. Someone who doesn't want me to change. They think they can still control me." Keanu's jaw tightened, though his voice remained calm. "Then they don't know you anymore." Anna swallowed hard. "What if they're right? What if I'm not strong enough to fight them?" He stepped closer, his voice steady, unwavering. "You don't have to fight them alone." And in that moment, Anna realized that standing up for herself had just opened another door, one that would... Anna didn't tell Keanu everything that night. The message burned in her pocket, its words echoing again and again. "Stop before you regret it." She tried to brush it off, telling herself it was nothing. But deep down, she knew it wasn't nothing. It was a shadow from her past, something she had never fully escaped. The next day, as she sat alone in her apartment, she stared at her phone. Another message had arrived. This one was longer. "You think you can walk away from the promises you made? You think you can speak out against the people who gave you everything? You don't understand how this works. If you don't stop, you'll lose more than your career." Her chest tightened. She hadn't thought about him in months. The person behind those words. He had been someone powerful, someone who once held doors open for her, but at a price she hadn't wanted to pay. For a long time, she had convinced herself it was over. But now, standing up for herself in the meeting, finding her voice, that must have reached him, and he wasn't ready to let her go. That evening, Keanu called her. His voice was calm, but he could sense the weight in hers. "Anna, you don't sound okay. Tell me what's going on." She hesitated, silence stretched. She wanted to keep him out of it, not drag him into her storm. But then she remembered again. Silence feels like a lie. So she told him. Not everything, but enough. About the man who had once promised her protection, who had once whispered that he could make her career shine brighter, and how, when she resisted, he turned that promise into a threat. Keanu listened without interrupting. When she finished, her voice shaking, he said softly, "You've been carrying this alone." She swallowed. "I didn't know who would understand." Keanu's tone grew firmer, though still gentle. "Anna, this isn't about Hollywood anymore. This is about control. And people like that, they only win if you stay afraid. Her eyes stung, not from weakness but from the truth in his words. He continued, "You don't owe him your silence. You don't owe him your fear. And you don't have to face him without someone at your side." Anna blinked, her breath unsteady. "But what if he destroys me? What if he destroys everything?" Keanu's gaze, even over the phone, felt steady, like a weight holding her together. "Then let him try. Because who you are is stronger than anything he can take away. And if he wants a fight, he'll find he's not just fighting you. He'll have to go through me, too." The words startled her, not because they were loud or dramatic, but because they were said with a calm certainty that felt unbreakable. For a long time, she didn't answer. Then, quietly, she whispered, "Why do you care so much? You don't even owe me this." There was a pause, and then Keanu replied, "Because once, someone gave me strength when I couldn't find it myself. And if I don't pass that forward, then all my pain meant nothing. You don't have to be alone in this." Anna's chest ached. It wasn't pity in his voice. It wasn't charity. It was something else. Respect. Maybe even trust. And that night, for the first time since the messages had begun, she felt a little less afraid. But the shadows from her past weren't done. Because the next morning, when she walked out of her apartment, she noticed a black car parked across the street, the same one she had seen the night before. The engine was running, but no one got out. She froze, her heart pounding, and in that moment, the black car didn't leave. It stayed across the street for hours, its windows dark, the engine humming like a threat. Anna tried to ignore it at first. She made coffee, she sat by the window. She told herself maybe it was nothing. But deep down, she knew it wasn't nothing. It was him. It was the shadow she thought she had escaped. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. "We warned you. This is your last chance. Stay quiet or you'll regret it." Her hands shook as she read it. For a moment, fear clawed at her chest, whispering that maybe she should give in. Maybe she should disappear. But then she heard Keanu's voice in her mind, steady and unshaken. "You don't have to fight them alone." Without thinking, she called him. Her voice broke when he answered. "Keanu! They're here." There was no pause, no hesitation. "Where are you?" "Home," she whispered. "Don't move. I'm coming." The line went dead, but his words stayed, a lifeline pulling her back from panic. Minutes later, she heard the low rumble of his motorcycle. Then, the knock at her door. When she opened it, there he was. Calm, steady, his presence like solid ground. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room, then moving to the window. He saw the car immediately. "You were right," he said quietly. Anna's throat tightened. "What do we do?" He turned to her, his voice firm but gentle. "We don't hide." Her breath caught. "But, listen," Keanu said, his gaze steady on hers. "Fear only grows when you feed it. The moment you stand up, it starts to shrink. He's counting on your silence. Don't give it to him." Anna swallowed hard. Her heart pounded, but she nodded. Together they walked outside. The night air was cool, but her palms were damp with sweat. The car door opened slowly and a man stepped out. Tall, dressed in a dark suit, his expression sharp with confidence. Anna knew him. She had once thought he was her path to success. Now he was nothing but a reminder of chains she refused to wear. "Anna," he said smoothly, as if he still owned her name. "We need to talk." Keanu stepped slightly in front of her, not blocking her, but standing as a wall of quiet strength. "Then talk here," he said. The man's eyes narrowed. "This isn't your business." "It is," Keanu replied calmly. When someone threatens her, it becomes my business. The man laughed lightly, shaking his head. Do you think you can protect her from everything? This industry doesn't bend to people like her. It eats them alive. Anna felt the old fear rise again. The words were sharp, familiar, meant to cut. But then she looked at Keanu. He wasn't shaken, not even a little. And in that moment, she remembered his words. You are more than what they see. Before she could stop herself, she stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. No, she said. It doesn't eat people alive. People like you do. And I won't let you anymore. The man blinked, startled. He hadn't expected her to speak. Not like this. She continued, her voice stronger now. You don't own me. You don't control me. I don't care if you take away every role, every opportunity. I'd rather lose everything than lose myself. Silence fell. The man's face darkened, but he said nothing. Keanu's presence beside her was like armor, but the words were hers, and they carried more strength than she thought she had. Finally, the man muttered, You'll regret this, before stepping back into his car. The engine roared, and within seconds, he was gone. Anna stood frozen, her chest rising and falling with each breath. She felt like she had just walked through fire, but she had walked through. Keanu looked at her, his eyes calm, almost proud. You did it. Tears blurred her vision, but she smiled faintly. I thought I couldn't. You could, he said softly. You just needed to believe it. For a long time they stood there, under the dim streetlight, the night quiet again. But inside her something had changed. The weight she carried wasn't gone, but it no longer crushed her. It no longer defined her. As they walked back inside, Anna whispered, Thank you. Not for saving me, but for reminding me I could save myself. Keanu's smile was gentle, almost hidden. That's all I ever wanted you to see. And in that moment, Anna knew his gentle words had not only carried her through fear, they had given her something she thought she had lost forever, her voice, her strength, her truth. Hollywood would still be loud. The battles ahead would still be real, but she wasn't the same anymore. She wasn't afraid of the shadows, because she had learned that even in silence,